Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Digital Dentistry Decoded podcast. We have another amazing guest and another 3D printer company, one of the most popular in dentistry. Today we have Georgio Haddad, the healthcare lead at Formlabs Dental. How are you doing, Giorgio?
Ahmad, super nice being with you finally on this podcast and very excited for our conversation and all the things we're going to be sharing here.
Man, it is my pleasure. We have talked a lot, my friend, over the years, and it's been quite an incredible journey that Formlabs Dental has been on, and I'm sure we're going to get into that. But for those who don't know, please just introduce yourself, my friend. You know, your background, how you got into dental, how long you've been at Formlabs Dental, etc. Please go ahead.
Yeah, actually it's kind of a exciting story, super not planned and just happened to be. I've been with Formlabs now more than 7 years throughout different offices, different roles and responsibilities. And over the past 3 years, which I would describe as the most exciting 3 years, I was based out of our headquarters in Somerville as part of the product management team. And as you know, these 3 years were like essential ones to one of our that led to the very exciting launch of our flagship products, the Form 4B and the Form 4BL. So I was a part of that, which was very exciting. And now it felt right to kind of carry on the torch from a great product to a great marketing and go-to-market execution. So I moved back to our European office and I now lead our healthcare marketing team, executing on making sure those incredible products have a market performance that matches their product performance, let's say.
That's super cool, man. So what did you do before Formlabs Dental?
Yeah, a good question. My background is in engineering. Actually, probably like let's chit chat about kind of like the happenings that go throughout life. My background was in mechanical engineering out of Lebanon, Beirut, and I was finishing my last semester, and I said to myself like, me getting employed, never. So what happened there is I followed my passion and started my own company, building mountain biking trails in rural areas of Lebanon, promoting outdoor sports and ecotourism back then. And then it just happened that a fellow mountain biker, who's a good friend, also became a mentor, owned a dental company, a reseller dental company out of Lebanon. And shortly, he kind of became a mentor and a very good friend. And one day told me like, hey, listen, like there's this whole digital dentistry thing, chairside milling, 3D printing, intraoral scanners, and it's super exciting. I thought I could handle it myself, but I think I need someone like you in the company to start that business unit. So I joined that for 4 years. It was an incredible experience. A lot of rolling up the sleeves, talking, installing hundreds of intraoral scanners, milling machines, 3D printers, CAD/CAM software, learning from the best at 3Shape, Plowmaker, MSI Core. And then shortly after that, 3-4 years of that, I got a LinkedIn message while I was in a bar in Beirut, and it was Formlabs trying to recruit me to move to Berlin. And 8 years later, here I am.
The rest is history, my man. That is quite a cool story. What year was it actually that you got into that kind of dental business? What year are we talking?
2014.
Wow,
Exciting years.
damn,
Yeah, like we're
like
talking
very
maybe
early
the
on.
previous one era, the monochrome cart. That's kind of like a good reference. And when was your first IDS big report of IDD? Was it like 2017 or 15? 19?
Yeah, it was 2019.
Huh. Okay. That's interesting. I do remember like reading something about IDD in 2017 already.
I
Yeah.
think that's when I started it. So I mean, you were in dental before I even graduated. I graduated in 2016. I've been in dental for close to a decade. And
Yeah.
soon after graduation, I worked alongside with my father, and I got exposed a bit like you to a lot of different scanners, a lot of different CAD/CAM toys. And I think what I started back then was just the blog. I was just writing a few things, writing a few
Yeah.
reviews, recording a few videos. But the big one was 2019. That's the one that kind of went crazy. The report I made was actually in 2019. That was the IDS report I did, and it's crazy to think that you got into digital even before me. I thought I was the digital guy, but you are the original digital guy, my man. So 2014, that was the era of like digital infancy.
Yeah, I think it was the year maybe like Trios Color came out, maybe like early 2014, like 2015 maybe. That was kind of like the tipping point of it, like the big Trios with the handle, and like color was such a new thing. I do remember installing one of those with the dentist and training him on that. That was like an interesting experience for sure.
It's crazy to think, man. You've been, around digital dentistry for that long. You've literally watched the industry evolve completely. I mean, from I think you said kind of like distribution or customer service
Yeah.
role to a working in the industry role. And what's really fascinating is, in the 2014, 15, 16 time when you probably were distributing these products, Formlabs was huge. It was like the number one dental printer. You remember when they first came out with the Form 2 and dental, and it was the printer to get.
Yeah. We did Formlabs launch the Form 2 around end of 2015 with some delays of delivery. And like in 16, it picked up. And 2017 was this massive thing at IDS. Everybody was going crazy about the Form 2 because uh, we got to give it to Formlabs back then. I was not yet at Formlabs. Like Formlabs ended up solving what I call the chicken and egg problem between intraoral scanners and the labs. So like dentists wouldn't buy an intraoral scanner because their labs would not want to pay $100,000 to buy a 3D printer and print their models to finish their case. And vice versa, the labs were not ready to invest in those big equipment without having the reassurance that there is proper intraoral scanner adoption on the dentist side. And I like genuinely think the Form 2 helped catalyze intraoral scanner adoption and digital dentistry as a whole, because suddenly you had all the labs kind of risk-free investing in a Form 2 and printing those models of the intraoral scanners they were receiving from their dentists. So definitely was a very interesting era, and the Form 2 specifically played a huge role in catalyzing that transition. Indeed. Yeah.
Yeah, I totally agree, man. The Form 2 was massive. It was like the printer that everyone got. It was actually my first ever 3D printer. It would have been around the 2017 mark. That was the first ever 3D printer that we got. And it's crazy to think how much 3D printing has changed. And, Formlabs has been part of that journey from the start. And you guys have had a tough journey, I have to say. Like you hit really strong with the Form 2, and then the market got really competitive. We had Asiga, we had SprintRay, we have all these Chinese products. And, I have to say, in this recent IDS, it's a bit like a bit of a comeback for Formlabs. I have to say, it's quite cool to see you guys back in the game.
Yeah, I have to say, like for those who don't know Formlabs, we also do a great technology and 3D printing for industries other than dental and medical. And like dental is magical. It's super competitive. It's like super out there. It's very exciting. It's like a reason to wake up every day and do a better product. And then the main reason is compared to the other industries, like dental applications and the value 3D printing provides for dentistry is very clear. In dentistry, like I'm going to print this surgical guide. I'm going to print this splint. And it's like a tool for a mean with a dedicated application. Whereas in certain other industries, kind of like, here's the technology, you do what you think is right as an application with it. So that makes dentistry super exciting. And the one of the main things I think is dentistry as a whole, regardless of 3D printing, is exciting. It's kind of like it walks that thin line between entrepreneurship and pure business ownership and the medical and healthcare sector. So it's not as regulated as medical, which we're in as well. And then there is a lot of spirit of entrepreneurship in it because dentists own their clinics, like they want to make more money, invest in the right tools that will generate more revenue for them. So, and of course, improve patient care.
It's super interesting that you say it's, and I've heard this a few times. We had a chat about this at IDS where you said dental is like super competitive. It's kind of weird as an industry of how competitive it is in 3D printing. And when you told me that at IDS, it kind of, I don't know. I only know this industry. Whereas you guys, you see a lot of different industries because dental is just part of your business. And so I think what you mentioned at IDS was that in most other industries, there's only like 2 to 3 main players. That's it. Is that true?
And in comparison to other industries, you mean?
Yeah.
I think it depends on the 3D printing technology, in fact. But yeah, it is like much more clearer outside of dentistry. And in dentistry, like the the business opportunity and the clarity of the application and the market data makes it kind of a bit more compelling business case for entrepreneurs. What they don't know, though, before entering the market is like how competitive it is and how hard to penetrate and kind of compete with the now kind of existing established brands in 3D printing for dental. So yeah,
Okay, so I'm gonna not click down on some of these things. Established brands. What are some of the top brands now in your eyes in 3D printing? Correct me if I'm wrong. It must be like Formlabs Dental, Asiga, SprintRay, and maybe Shining 3D. Is that basically the main players now?
Yeah, I think there's definitely a consolidation of the market. And the one thing to point out here, you always have to segment the market and understand it well. We have the labs and we have the dental practices, where I would arguably go a bit nicher and segment the dental practices into ortho practices who've been faster to adopt 3D printing and have a clear ROI case of getting 3D printing into their practice. So I would say in the lab market, it's a very interesting one. You have bigger industrial players that are present as well. Asiga have done a great job building a great reputation on the reliability and the accuracy of their prints. And then you got Carbon as well in the labs that is very relevant. And then Formlabs is actually the number one in installed base in US dental labs.
Wow.
So that's kind of, I would say, the top players on that end of the spectrum. And then when you zoom into dental practices, Asiga's there, we are there, and definitely SprintRay is there. So you start feeling a bit of consolidation of the market. Whereas companies like Shining 3D, yes, they're up and coming, and this is very interesting. But I think they're leaning more into their one-stop solution rather than hyper-focusing on a great 3D printing solution. So they got the iOS scanner and some CAD solutions in between, and then the 3D printing part, which kind of positions them as a turnkey solution provider. But I think like on the 3D printing side, when you zoom in, there is the top three players and then comes other players.
That's super interesting, man. And you mentioned the applications of dentistry. I mean, one thing that's really cool about dentistry in my eyes is that the applications, you can count them on two hands. It's such a niche industry that all the applications are there and you can learn them quite quickly, I feel. What are the ones that are gaining the most traction? Of course, it's interesting that you said the ortho lab. So obviously models are still massive. Splints, I assume, are still massive. We've got this up and coming kind of restorative boom, which half of us don't know if it's just marketing or if it's actually booming. And then dentures, I hear removables are really big. I mean, you guys see the data. What's so amazing about dentistry and digital dentistry is most of these digital companies like yourself see what people are printing. And so what is out there? What's kind of the big things that are people printing?
Yeah, I think a very good way and approach of tackling that question is understanding what the top CAD players are seeing in the market and kind of as well design services, which also backs up what we're seeing in terms of resin consumption. Models continue to be the bread and butter. I've been in digital dentistry for a while. Every time I see like we're gonna see some decline in the restorative models because we're moving to model-less crowns more and more. It's not happening, and it's not happening anytime soon for sure. Especially that labs use that sometimes as a marketing tool and communication tool with the dentist. They want to present a really nice product when they ship it back, so they ship the crown with the model, even if it's a full anatomical milled restoration. So models are there to stay at least for the foreseeable future, and is kind of the bread and butter of 3D printing today. And also you zoom in on the aligner manufacturers as well, where there is a huge demand for model printing. And then in second place, I would say that recently overtook surgical guides, at least in our consumer base, is Splints. Splints is an obvious winner. It's kind of like 3D printing very quickly became the golden standard of manufacturing splints because of the materials are the manufacturing technique that has a lot of advantage compared to subtractive manufacturing and other alternatives, and the quality of the materials. And then some brands have done a great job there in cementing their name as a go-to for splint production. And then surgical guide, I would say, in third place. And then denture is, I would say, the fastest growing one for removables, all on X. But the volumes are still not there when you compare it to the other applications, I would say. But this is where we're seeing a quick and fast growth, because also digital denture, especially in the economy sector, is a no-brainer. You can reprint it. If someone loses it, you can send the patient home with 2 or 3 as part of her. You can be creative on the business side and the solution providing for your patient and your dentist when it comes to digital dentures. And then on the restorative side, it's very interesting, I would say. One thing after IDS was clear. Nobody really knows what will the outcome be. There's a lot of speculation, but there's a lot of ambiguity around it. And there is a big mix of skepticism, but also early adopters that are super excited. And then some companies that are pushing hard on that storyline as well. So I would say it's going to come. I would say it's not there, and it's not there soon. What do you think?
Look, man, I have to agree. I still at this stage view printed crowns as composite crowns. That's just this is just what they are. Anyone who's printed a crown with any resin out there, you just have to put a burr to it, and you know this is not even close to ceramic. And I think, and I've brought this up a lot in IDS, it's not the discussion of will it ever beat ceramic like zirconia or Emax, because it never will do that. I think there's a clear theoretical limit. Even though we have all these new pods and all these other different devices for printing restoratives, I think resin is resin. And as much filler as you put into it, there's a theoretical limit. Now we've got SprintRay with the press system, which is super exciting, and everyone's kind of excited about that, but we still haven't quite seen the highly filled resins yet. You know, they announced the Ivoclar collaboration, nothing yet. Everyone's just waiting. I think, though, as it sits, it's exciting because it opens an avenue for people who want to do some CAD/CAM in-house that otherwise wouldn't be able to. And it's kind of like the digital dentures with the kind of economy option. It allows you to do an in-house crown that you may not bill like a ceramic crown. I know a lot of people, and some of the leading voices right now in printing restoratives, they'll do restorative veneers, inlays, onlays, and they will print these, but they don't charge them like a ceramic. It's somewhere in between. I think that's kind of where it sits at the moment. And of course, there's still the big if with the CAD. The learning Exocad and learning how to design is a massive gatekeeper for the industry. A lot of dentists are not going to do this. And whether AI uplifts this in the future, anyone's guess.
Yeah, I think there are several points to dig into. Very, very good insights, spot on. I would say, let's start with what is kind of potentially good enough for this to pick up. Talking to customers, dentists like you, Ahmad, my understanding is that to hit what is golden standard today, which even if you lower the mechanical properties barrier and go for Emax, means you got to hit certain mechanical properties. Talking flexural strength, more than 300 megapascal for Emax and 1,000 on average for zirconia. So we're still quite far from that.
Half of that.
And then
half
of that. Really. Half of the Emax one. Yeah, so basically 15% of the zirconia one. And then there's the aesthetics part. I think like multilayer zirconia or like Emax have reached a level of aesthetic that we're still quite far from with 3D printed resin. And the third one, if we want to gamble on share side, we got to make this whole thing very easy to use and solve the dirty little secret of 3D printing, which is the post-processing. Yeah. Has to be much more straightforward, and this is an area that we're very focused on at Formlabs, kind of figuring out what's post-processing 2.0 in the 3D printing world. So that's one thing in terms of like, hey, what is good enough? What is the golden standard we're comparing it to? On the AI side, for the design part, I'm less worried about this. It's moving so fast, and pillar companies, I would call them, and big players in the industry are solving it the right way.
Yeah.
You see 3Shape integrating 3Shape Automate within the Trios. Like if I have a Trios and I want to use AI, why would I use the 3Shape Automate one, which is very competitively priced? And then once I have the Night Guard back, after 5 minutes, send it directly to my Formlabs printer. Same with Itero. We're now seeing it with their cloud solution, which is Exocad on the cloud in there. And then, of course, you got Medit with their suite of CAD solution that is getting more and more intelligent as well. So you see all those big intraoral scanner players solving that bit of the design part, and we just have to plug in smartly to that and make it seamless from start to end, and kind of collaborate and create that partnership and that incentive to those intraoral scanners to partner with us by kind of creating that demand for them on the AI side and the design side of things.
I love what you're saying, man. Honestly, it's refreshing, and I think it's because you've been in the industry so long, and you're also part of the distribution side where you really have a good grasp of the entire market, from scan to design to printing. Because I totally agree. I think the scanner companies are going to be solving the design, and it's interesting though when you say the printables are only 15% of zirconia. I'm just going to play devil's advocate. I mean, I'm still a massive Emax fan.
In terms of flexural strength, I would say.
Yeah. What I was going to say is, do we really need 1,000 plus megapascals? Because that's always the argument, right? Like, we are trying to mimic nature. Enamel, it's a bit embarrassing. I'm a dentist and I should know this off by heart, but I think enamel is 200 to 300 megapascal. I need to chat GPT or something.
Enamel is 10 to 50 megapascal, and dentine is 200 to 300. But I can't share the resources.
Guys, we're going to have to crop all of this out. Jesus Christ, I just embarrassed myself. But like, the point is like, if we're trying to get materials that are similar to that, I mean, technically resin is getting close. I think, to me, the issue I have with the printed resins right now is the aesthetics. I agree. They're not even close to what I would be happy to charge a patient a full crown for. And the other thing is the wear characteristics. We don't know. It doesn't matter what the marketing materials say. We're getting close, and some KOLs are really pushy with, their lasting. But the reality is we don't know. And I've been burnt by this before. Anyone who's been in this industry has been burnt by this before. Lava Ultimate burnt the industry. Celtra Duo burnt the industry. So a lot of these materials that come fast and hard, they need years. They need at least a year or two to see if they're going to withstand the oral cavity.
Yeah. Also, like, we have to look at history and learn from it. Like, if there is a bunch of examples in dentistry history that show that, like, hey, there is that phase of skepticism, and then the materials get better, and then the case studies and the academic evidence starts piling up to build that trust. Think of implants. Brenmark discovered osseointegration in the 50s, and then it was only early 2000 and implants actually got really adopted, dental implants. And then zirconia, same thing. When they first came out, there was a lot of skepticism about it, and now it's the golden standard of metal-free restorations, and is very affordable to produce. So we have a lot of examples of this. I wouldn't bet against 3D printed crowns on the medium to long term. Let's put it this way, just learning from previous experiences in the industry. But it's just not there yet. On paper, we need to solve the mechanical, address the mechanical properties, address the aesthetic properties, and create a workflow that is really seamless and very easy, and improve on the post-processing part. And then once those things are done, you gotta still wait for the clinical evidence to create that trust and adoption. So
I love how you bring up the post-processing, because I totally agree. That's kind of like the ugly cousin of 3D printing that everyone just keeps in the corner. Like, no one talks about it. No one really mentions anything about this, and it's a bit of a mess right now, post-processing. Like, right now with 3D printed crowns, You're supposed to spray them. No one really knows how long to spray them for. If you spray them too much, they go patchy white and matte appearance. If you spray them too little, they're sticky. I totally agree. The post processing has to be much better. I actually like the thing that Asiga came up with at IDS. They have this like little shaker thing, which is a step in the right direction. At least we're talking about this now.
Yeah, interesting. I haven't seen that. I spent some time at Asiga booth with our friends there, but I didn't see that. What is it? Is it like a?
They probably hid it from you, Georgio. They're like, yeah, just look at the Asiga Max. That's what we released. It looked like a little shaker. Now, people have talked about this in like dental Facebook groups and using like cocktail shakers to wash crowns that way. They've made essentially something like that. I actually have it on my blog if you want to see it, but I have to send you a photo.
Okay.
But I mean,
Okay, I'll check that out.
Post-processing is kind of developing, especially in the restorative post-processing, because for the longest time, curing and washing was all about models, surgical guides, and splints. It was submerge them and take them out and cure them. But with crowns and these highly filled resins, I think we need a different approach.
Yeah, definitely. And if throughout that process and R&D cycle, you figure out how to make it multi-layered, that would be great.
A lot of people are talking about that. You're not the only company that hints this. I'm super excited for what's to come. A lot of printing companies seem to be trying to fix this challenge of multi-layer resins. And that's what's so exciting, man. And I never rule out anything in dentistry because I've only been in it for a short time, just close to a decade, and it's already changed so much. I mean, when I was in dental school 10 years ago, we only did amalgam filling and some composites and everything was impression. And also zirconia 10 years ago was totally different to zirconia now. So I feel like we're looking at generation one of a lot of these resins and protocols, and it's just going to get better and better.
Actually, I think like the day 3D printed restoration would have made it if you as a dentist, I know you have several CERECs, and you have a printer that is able to print what is permanent crown. And a patient walks in, and then you reach, regardless of the budget of that patient or like type of treatment, then you naturally reach out to the printer to do that restoration. That would be the day where we actually have made it on the restorative side. 3D printing on the restorative side. Yeah, so that's yeah.
I don't think it's there yet, that's for sure. Like I'm a CEREC guy. If I have a CEREC there and I can mill an Emax in 10 minutes and I can furnace it in 10, 15 minutes, yes, I can print a crown a bit faster. Let's say on the SprintRay miter, 7 minutes, and wash it in 3 minutes and cure it in 3-4 minutes. But I still find myself reaching for Emacs. I mean, I just have a lot more trust in it.
I have a question to you, actually, that could spark a good conversation there. What do you think of the progression of adoption of 3D printers compared to chairside milling machines? And are we going to observe a curve that is closer to the intraoral scanner curve in terms of adoption, or is it going to get stuck in that hole on the chairside milling machines? Because on the lab side in US, like 60% of labs have a printer. Medium to large labs, we're close to 100%. All of them have 3D printers.
Look, that's a really good question. And I'll put it this way. I think it's going to be challenging to have a boom like intraoral scanners because that was just something else. The 2019, 2020, 21, 22 era was like everyone was buying scanners. Do I think printers are going to be like that? Not quite. Do I think they're going to be like milling machines? Not quite. I really believe it's something in the middle. I think it's going to grow exponentially. And I think this because a printer, unless you go for like a hardcore restorative printer, like the Midas, but let's say you get a Formlabs or a generalized printer. It's like a workhorse in your practice. It doesn't just do crowns and restorations. It does everything. And one of the things it does, like you mentioned, is models and splints. And this is why I think the uptake of printers will be much more than milling machines. And to be honest, from the stats that I talk to other companies, we're already there. I mean, milling machines and chairside is around 10 to 15%. And I believe printers has already exceeded that. So
yeah.
Printers are already there, and I think they're going to keep growing. If anything, I think this year, next year, as people warm up to the idea, it's going to grow even faster, especially the fact that everyone's digitizing. The more people that digitize, naturally, you need a printer just to print basic things like models. And so I really do think there's going to be tremendous growth. The other thing with printers is that prices are going down. Prices are really affordable now. You guys release your Form 4B Plus at an aggressive price. And so I think to me, that's a natural progression of most clinicians. Buy a scanner, then get a printer. Uh, what's interesting though is how many people are going to utilize that printer and for what? Do I think everyone that has a printer is going to be printing crowns? I don't know. But I can say that if I was a practice owner now and I was digitizing, no doubt in my mind, I'll buy a scanner and a printer. No doubt in my mind.
Yeah, I think that confirms a bit the trend we're seeing and the sudden acceleration of adoption. I wouldn't call it sudden, but much faster acceleration than what we've seen in chairside milling throughout the years. So yeah, it's very exciting for us. We're kind of very, very looking forward for that next phase of early majority. You know, the demands and requirements of the early majority after that 15% phase of adoption is gonna be a bit different. We're gonna start focusing on the strengths that Formlabs have, like the ease of use, how easy it is to learn, how easy it is to delegate, how clear of an ROI case it is. I mean, props to iOS. Intraoral scanners is a hard case to prove in terms of ROI compared to a 3D printer. Because 3D printer, you're producing a product that you're eventually offering and selling, and then it's much easier to build the ROI case. Intraoral scanners have had a harder time proving the economic benefits, and they still we're talking about 60% intraoral scanners in the US. So this is definitely aspirational, and we'd love to see that adoption curve blow up in the next couple of years.
I think, and that's a fascinating point that you bring up. I mean, the ROI of a scanner, and I always say this, without producing something is actually very low. You basically just replaced impression material. But that's where a lot of people that are still hanging on to impression material don't get it. I mean, a scanner by itself isn't just purely about ROI. It's just the standard of care, and it's all the other benefits, the patient benefits, no gagging, no improgum material getting stuck on a patient's bridge. It's easy to scan everyone. It's much faster. And I think that's where it really boomed, because when people saw this, every dentist in the world knows the pain point of taking an impression on a gagging patient. Every dentist in the world. One of the first things I ever did in dental school was take an impression on a gagging patient. I didn't know what I was doing. I was just a dental student. Put a whole bunch of alginate on a tray, put it in his mouth, and it was horrific. I still remember it to this day, the gagging and the dry heaving. And so most dentists have that memory. And I think that's where iOS just was like, I solved this. No more pain.
No more trauma.
No more trauma, no more stress. And so that's where it's really boomed. On the topic of 3D printing, what do you think still, because you've been in this for a long time and the industry has totally changed from 2015, 2016 to now. But what do you think are still some of the misconceptions dentists have about 3D printing?
Yeah, I would say the number one misconception is, as any new technology you're adopting in the clinic, is the time investment you got to put in with the team specifically to optimize your workflow and make this new tool you acquired in your practice an enabler and a tool to increase efficiency of work. We see still some sort of misconceptions about like, hey, if I bought a 3D printer, magic is going to happen the next day. No, you got to build up your skills and delegate to the team. You start with the easy stuff, and then you go to more progressive stuff that might generate more revenue, but you need to kind of go through the steps to get to the more complicated indications manufacturing in-house. I think that's kind of the main misconception today. My kind of prediction of the future misconception is going to be, if we as an industry lean too much on the final restoration story, I think the new misconception would be that like, hey, I can buy a printer, print a crown, and it's going to be as good as the Emacs and Zirconia. And then the risk there is that 2, 3, 5 years from now, it backlashes on the industry. So it's kind of like my small kind of fear for the future, and kind of skepticism, where we have the responsibility of saying the right words in the marketing and pushing the words out as constructively as possible.
Yeah, that's a fair call. And especially, with it's hard to cut through what's real anymore in dentistry. I mean, that's one of the reasons why I started IDD, is just to release,
Cut the BS.
cut the BS, basically, just release unbiased feedback from a clinician, like a fellow colleague who actually tries the stuff in his clinic. And I think it's getting harder and harder with the age of social media, with the age of, you don't know who's on whose payroll. And I feel kind of sorry for some clinicians who are starting off their journey and they don't know where or what to do. And what would you be your advice for them?
I think talk to close colleagues who have experienced and adopted that. I think peer-to-peer is still like the best way to kind of build that confidence and education. And then talk to many, because having been in product management and having interviewed so many users, you got to filter things out and understand the common requirements. Different dentists have different needs, have different opinions, and those that might not be the same as what you actually need in your practice. So the more you talk to, the better it is. I think that's a big advice. And then the second one is do your research properly, and then try to cut through the BS of the marketing. Ask for live demos. Go to trade shows and see the printing live in front of you, and understand the economics of it. Especially the running cost and the hidden cost of it. I think that's where Formlabs honestly excels. There's no real hidden costs, and we do what we call value innovation. We continually innovate while reducing the costs of our innovation and passing that on to our customers.
Well, you mentioned some exciting things, about let's say, the boom in 3D printing that's gonna happen, I hope, or is currently happening. And I think genuinely Formlabs Dental right now is as poised as ever to capitalize on this, because a few years ago it was a totally different story for you guys. Look, I like the Form 2, but it's just the market totally changed. From SLA that was slow and all these fast printers, and dentists were demanding fast printers, 3B plus and all of that, still not quite there. You guys were a closed system. And look, props to you guys. I mean, IDS was quite massive for you guys. I mean, please walk us through some of your innovations, because you released a good printer last year, and genuinely, it's a fantastic printer.
Two great printers.
The big one and the small one, is that?
The big one and the small one. Yeah.
The two printers, and I don't mean to be rude. I know you guys give it a special name, but let's just call it an LCD. I know it's MSLA.
Oh, no. Actually, we don't shy off of that. And the technical name is called MSLA, Mask SLA.
Okay.
So
that's LCD.
No, that's, yeah. I mean, LCD is one of the components of the technology for sure.
For sure.
Yes.
And that's just kind of following industry trends. The industry went from basically SLA, DLP. Some people still do DLP, but the majority now are LCDs. Faster, they work, the LCD screens are great, etc. And you guys did that. So now you have a fast printer. And one thing that really I was so happy about, because, I love to see this industry grow and develop, is that you guys opened up. And I think this was probably one of the most landmark things to happen for the company since Formlabs Form 2, because one of the most, biggest criticisms was your lock system. You don't have that many, gold standard resins. You had the whole lineup, but people wanted to use the Keystones and the Pack Dents, and you opened up, and not just you opened up, you picked two of the best resins on the market. So we talked about dentures being a huge growth segment. Lucitone is now available on Formlabs Form 4B. And I think that's just massive, because that is the denture resin. It looks absolutely amazing. And anyone you ask says that is the denture resin to use. And of course, Pack Dent, which opens you up to all these amazing tooth resins like Titan and Sculpture. And look, it was just a huge show. I think you guys are really gearing up for something.
Yeah, so basically, we learned a lot from talking to our customers, and we needed kind of a drastic change in the strategy and the approach of the market. Um, so, first and foremost, like last year, we had a huge year. We launched 2 flagship printers that kind of were very transformative in the way we do 3D printing, and also very transformative in the brand perception of Formlabs. So one of the things is that we were using laser SLA, which inherently had the disadvantage of slow printing. So we switched to MSLA, or what we call low force display technology, and print speeds are super fast. You can print 11 models in 9 minutes, you name it, all on X in 20, 25 minutes. So that was a big change for us. And then the second thing is people loved the ease of use of our controlled ecosystem, but there was a lot of requests to be able to print certain resins on our printers, and the market was shifting. And even though like we have 50 plus PhD and scientists developing our materials in-house, and we manufacture our materials in Ohio in our own factory, there's only so much you can do to stay on top of the material innovation. And at some point, another third-party resin will come and be a bit better than your own resin. And your customer and dentists and lab will demand that resin and want it on their printer. So for all those reasons and understanding the market, we basically did 2 shifts in the Formlabs brand and products. One, they're super fast now. 2, now they're super open with open material mode. What that means is any third-party resin company can now certify their resins on the Formlabs printer and then make those resin settings publicly available. So that's what's happening. You mentioned actually the Dentsply Lucitone, which was validated by Dentsply themselves, and like Dentsply's standards of validation are quite high, and it was a high bar. So for them to trust the Form 4B is a big step forward. And one thing to note there is the Form 4B is the smartest investment and most affordable solution to print those high-end dentures at the moment in the market. And then PackDent you mentioned, and then there is all the third-party resin manufacturer you can think of that are working hard on validating their resins on our printers at the moment. So the library will continue to grow as we speak. And we're going to be watching that space, and we'll continue to innovate as well on our side on the material front.
That's awesome, man. And can you give us some teasers if I put you on the spot here for the future? I mean, obviously, IDS is 2 years away. We just had IDS. Is it more like hardware or material now? What's the biggest front now that everyone's pushing?
Yeah, I think you cannot dissociate hardware from material. Like a potential new stepping stone of material development might require new hardware, and vice versa. New hardware might enable new materials. So they go hand in hand. But I can tell you some areas of focus that you can use as a hint. So I spoke about post-processing 2.0. I think that's going to be very interesting and kind of like will remove one of the last pain points of 3D printing. I think that's definitely going to be a focus. And then on the application side, it's no secret. There's 2 holy grail solutions that most of the companies are working on. One is a definitive permanent solution for restorative application. The other is directly printed aligners. If you're serious about dental 3D printing as a company, you're at least doing hardcore R&D on those products or collaborating with the right other experienced manufacturer and bringing something interesting to the market that can actually be quite transformative.
It's funny that you mentioned those 2 applications. So you kind of mentioned that the definitive restoration is not quite there yet, early days. What's your take on the aligner printing? Because to me, I think that restorative printing is way beyond that. Like I've put in a number of printed crowns, and look, they might not be as good as Emacs, but they're getting pretty bloody nice, especially with some of these HT resins that SprintRay is developing. They're pretty nice. It's a big jump from what they used to be. I've tried aligner printing directly, and it was a mess every time. I mean, what's your take on this?
Yeah, it's definitely has some room to grow, I would say, and to improve. And then you have a quite strong and like a stringent golden standard, which is the thermoformed aligners there. And it is worth zooming in here on aligner manufacturers versus orthodontic practice or GPs manufacturing aligners. I would say for a B2B business like aligner manufacturers, the transition to directly printed aligners might take some time. One, they need the clinical evidence that it actually works. Two, they've already optimized their processes and their cost per part is very low. So it's going to be a very expensive switching cost if the business case is not there and if the demand is not there from the orthodontist or consumers directly, if it's a B2C business model on the aligner front. And then if you zoom in on the practices side or orthodontists, today investing in a thermoforming machine, cutting machine, or doing it manually could be a bit cumbersome for an orthodontist in the practice, even though the adoption is quite higher than the GP market on the orthodontic practices. But it starts becoming a bit more compelling that if you can 3D print the aligner directly instead of printing the model and having to thermoform and cut, you start seeing some value added that could shift the narrative. Plus, if aligner manufacturers and direct print aligner companies manage to convince us about the other subtle advantages of aligners, such as different thicknesses, can move different teeth at different speed and apply different forces, this could go a long way. So yeah, I think that's kind of like a fair assessment of labs versus clinics and the value proposition of directly printed aligners.
Yeah, man, that's actually a very good point. Didn't think about that. Like these custom aligners, which may be thick or thin in certain areas. That's fascinating, depending on the print. It was a struggle to post process them, to be honest. It was a mess. And if you do it wrong, the aligner's stuffed up, and then you have to go back and print that specific one. But I've seen some interesting moves, like by companies like Graphy and their little post processing robot and etc. It's fascinating where it's all going. Speaking of materials, though, I want to double down on this. Where do you see material science and printing going? Is there like some hints? Is there some exciting biocompatible resins, or is it the multi-layer thing, or I just have to wait?
I can walk you through potential different innovation tracks we can take. One is the mechanical properties of things, which is we need to work on that no matter what the application is. So there's the innovation that is happening on that front of how like we can improve mechanical properties of 3D printed resins. And we got a lot of learnings here from dental, medical, and industrial R&D that we do in-house. And then the other one is the aesthetic part of things. Like what are the right formulations that will get us to what is required in terms of aesthetic requirements, especially on the restorative side. But double clicking on that a bit more, what could that mean in terms of the multi-layer solution that everybody is working towards?
Yeah, fair call. I guess the multi-layer thing is particularly fascinating because it kind of hits the aesthetic requirements. I mean, that's one of the issues that we have right now with these printed resins is that it's kind of like generation one zirconia. They're too opaque and they're too dull. There's just dull is the wrong word because that's to do with value, but they're too monochrome. We don't really have all these translucencies like we do with ceramics, and especially we don't have multi-layers, which I think if someone can figure that out, that'd be massive for 3D printing.
Yeah, definitely. I think like when I want to think about the future, mostly like one thing I helps me kind of imagine is what the future of dentistry would look like is imagining what the patient experience uh, would look like in this futuristic world. Yeah, like how do you imagine it from the moment a patient actually calls you or texts you to actually whatever treatment they need and the final appliance that was produced? Have you ever thought about it this way, like starting maybe, I don't know, with a digital twin avatar thing of the patient?
Yeah, in a way, look, I have. I mean, I think it's fascinating to think. I think even from the calls, I think a lot more things are going to be automated in the future. I think a lot more AI and these caller robots are going to be more common in the future. I think scanning is just going to be stock standard, and I believe that AI will be universal, especially in any CAD design in the soon future. We're seeing that in labs already with adoption of AI tools.
Yeah.
Uh,
But let me interrupt you here on the scanning part.
yeah,
Do you think scanning will continue to belong chair sides, or like what about teledentistry, or what like dental monitoring is doing there?
yeah. I mean, look, it's a fascinating thing. I think teledentistry is cool, and dental monitoring. They give them the retractors, and it clips on, and it takes a photo, and that's cool. I think it takes a certain amount of just dexterity and a small wand to be able to really do an intraoral scan. I think like some scans extraorally can be done patient side, but I still believe the majority of prosthetic scanning, of course, will be chair side. Where that goes is also fascinating because now we're getting into a new era of intraoral scanning with, I think 3Shape pioneered the way with this diagnostic scanning. And I think this is going to be more and more common, where you take an intraoral scan and then somehow that combines with your x-rays, and AI is used to basically make a full report on all the different types of records you've taken. I think that will be the future.
Yeah, let's see from a scan to a printed appliance. Let's say what 5 to 10 minutes.
That'll be the dream. And I really do believe once we get to that point, then the question of is it good enough totally changes. Because I don't believe you can still do that with milling. I think milling is almost capped out. I talked to the milling guys just
But
recently with VHF, and they say that there's still room. But I think most of the industry feels that milling has plateaued a bit. I mean, there's probably some room for improvement in material side, but it's a much more mature market than 3D printing.
yeah, definitely. If you're a serious R&D material company, you probably place your bets on the 3D printing, 3D printed resin or other type of materials versus more the conventional subtractive stuff. Yeah, but yeah, there will be always room for milling. But it's gonna the value proposition is gonna decrease with time.
And you know what's funny? You mentioned the restoration in 5 minutes, and I'm really curious where you feel Formlabs Dental fits in the same day workflow. Because I think, and I've told you this openly, currently you guys do a lot of things right, but one of the missing pieces for you guys is just small trays, small build platforms. Is this something we can expect to see, or is this something that is coming in the future?
Yeah. So like one thing we really dig into in our innovation cycles is not every solution communicated by customers is actually the solution to their problems.
Mm.
So you have to kind of double click on what are really the problems there that we're trying to solve and how to solve them. Understanding why there is a need for that, or what is actually the problem you're trying to solve. For example, the smaller tanks, smaller build platforms. What is your problem really, like having a big tank and a big platform, or is your problem really the speed of printing that you want to tackle?
Answer that.
Yes.
My problem is getting like a 600 bottle of crown resin and having to fill up a huge tank, and I use like 10 or 15 milliliters from it.
Okay, then in this case, like we gotta double click a bit more on that and understand, like, hey, what's the difference for you if you store that resin in a tank or you store it in the bottle?
Okay. Yeah, fair enough.
So, but that's kind of just to
Georgia,
illustrate that.
this feels like a therapy session.
But no, but seriously talking here is like we see a lot of innovations in the market that seem very good on paper, but once you zoom in and understand if it's really being adopted and if it was really a product worth innovating for, to see the results that and the performance it's having, then you start kind of having question marks if it's actually solving the right problems. And then this is where you take a step back and say, like, hey, I want to dig in more and understand what the problem is really, so I can solve it properly.
Yeah, fair enough. And
Yeah.
obviously, you guys have a big team, and you're not exactly blind. You see what's happening in the market, and you're probably just about as passionate as I am. So I'm sure you watch the market, and I'm really curious to see what else you guys do, because the past few moves have been a move in the right direction. I think Formlabs was a bit of a sleeper for a while, a good 4 or 5 years, where people were waiting. And the market kind of went crazy with the SprintRays and the Asigas and everything. And it's like I say, it's nice to see you guys back with some really aggressive plays.
Yeah, we really want to be positioned and perceived as a confident brand that has easy to use, affordable solutions. And we want to be an approachable brand as well. So we want to create that feeling for the customer, and to be like, hey, you can approach us, you can ask us questions, you can also trust what we're saying.
Speaking of the reliability, because I agree as well. I mean, this is something I wrote in my review about your printer, and your printers are some of the most reliable on the market for sure. I don't know if it's the aggressive supports or the really good software or just everything works, the monitoring. My question is, what's some advice? Because people are still scared of 3D printing, and a lot of people don't really get it. And so, what's some advice for clinicians who are getting into 3D printing? What's some best practices they can adopt to get reliable prints?
Yeah, I think like there's not much to say more here, Ahmad, in the sense of the auto-generated supports and the checks that are required before printing are very user intuitive and guide you in the right direction to avoid any kind of mistakes. So the cartridge, when you slide it in, it knows what cartridge type it is. It asks you to open up the cap, make sure it's open. The tank, same thing, has the sensors to make sure, and the RFID tags, that everything is done the right way. Build platform has the sensor to make sure it's well inserted. And then if you did something wrong, you got something in the tank, we have the mixer automatically detecting the debris, avoiding like a bigger print failure, and telling you what to do. So I think like there is less and less to, let's say, verbally guide the user. Our team has done a great job in this being kind of as automated as possible, or as well guided throughout the user experience and the user interface.
Yeah, I mean, I have to agree. I mean, that the user friendliness is definitely there. I guess
Yeah.
just follow the instructions is your advice.
Yeah, and follow the instruction, and it's just based on what I hear from our customers, especially customers who have multiple 3D printers. When you go talk to their staff and ask them which is your preferred printer and why, we come back to the real core requirement of our users in dentistry. They love the ease of use. They love that you don't have to pour the resin, but you insert the cartridge. They love that you don't have to mix manually the resin in the tank. It does it automatically for you. They love the build platform flex that automatically detaches the parts from your printer. So these are the things that really users, daily users, care about. And we think we're focusing on the right things to kind of create that enchanting experience and solution for our users.
Yeah, man. And look, like I said, it seems like you guys are really poised in the right place. It's exciting. I'm super thrilled to just see what happens in the next few years. And speaking of the next few years, what are you most excited about in the next 2 to 3 years in this space? What excites you? I'm sure you walked around IDS, you saw a lot, and there's a lot probably going on in your mind in this space. So please let us know.
Yeah, like let's break it down in terms of like more 2 year spam and more 5 year plus. I think these are two different approaches and how you think about things. In the next 2 years, I think it's all about execution more than crazy innovation. Delivering on promises, putting your head down, make sure you're running a healthy business, solving the real problems for your customers, delivering on the real requirements, and doing it through the right sales channels and partnerships in the industry. So I think we're going to see a lot of tactical moves in terms of the partnerships that are happening to create more value and capture more market share on that side. And then meanwhile, resin manufacturers, printer manufacturers are going to continue to innovate on the resin side of things. On the hardware things for the next 2 years, my prediction is going to slow down. All of the major manufacturers have released something really nice and interesting in the past year. So following normal innovation cycles, I think we're less likely to see big innovations on the 3D printer hardware side of things next ideas. Looking a bit more forward, I think there is a lot of room for improvement and a lot of room for innovations. I think there's going to be a lot of focus on the holy grail applications of aligner direct printing and permanent restorations, and solving the actual problems that will take us to kind of potentially match what's good enough, or actually what the golden standard is in terms of mechanical properties, post-processing, and the aesthetics of things.
I love it, man. I mean, look, that is the perfect wrap up to this episode, guys. You heard it here from Georgio Haddad. We are so lucky to have him here. I mean, a lot of our guests, they're busy people, and I'm sure they got a ton of things to do, but they join us just to kind of share their passion about our amazing industry. So, Georgio, thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, Ahmad, it was a pleasure, and really excited about the future and what we're going to bring to the market, and all the feedback and the love we're going to get from our users and this super exciting industry. Yeah, let's make dentistry easier, and thank you very much.
Thank you, man. You heard it again from Georgio Haddad, the healthcare lead at Formlabs Dental. That's a wrap up for this episode, guys. We have talked about so much 3D printing, CAD CAM, milling, super exciting stuff. And, to me, what's going to be interesting is hopefully I continue this podcast for many, many years. But in 2 to 3 years, Georgio, let's get you back on, maybe even sooner, maybe just next year. And then we can reflect about what we've talked about and where the industry is. So that's a wrap for this episode, guys, of the Digital Dentistry Decoded podcast. Thanks so much for listening. Share, comment, like, all of that. Subscribe, share it with your friends and your colleagues. It really does help us out a lot. And I will see you in the next episode. Thanks for watching.